Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time of day it is for you and whatever part of the world you're from. This is the bi-weekly Backdrop CMS user experience and user interface meeting. My name is Martin Price. I'm a web developer in North East England, United Kingdom, and let's go to Robert.
I'm Robert Lang, bug folder on the internet in Altadena, California. Turn it over to Tim.
Aren't many of us are there. Yeah, I am Tim Erickson, St. Paul Tim on the internet and in Deerwood, Minnesota. And we'll leave it at that. We're a small group. Let's go ahead, Robert. You had an issue that you wanted some feedback on, and you explained it to us briefly. Could you re-explain it and share the issue number?
Yeah, this is issue 6180, and it is about drop buttons in views, in how they look in any theme other than 7, in particular in Basis view. It's the default user-facing view. And essentially, I'd say the appearance is broken. If you have a table that includes drop buttons, they extend outside the table, the width jumps around, they don't behave properly. And the reason for that is that there is JavaScript needed to go through all the elements and set the width of the buttons and also set the width of the parent. And that JavaScript exists in the 7 theme, but not in Basis, and it's not in Core. And so in 7 theme, drop buttons behave correctly, but in Basis, they don't. And so the issue is to fix that. And what seemed to make sense on this, but I want to get further input, is that we would move the JavaScript into Core, so it'll be applied to any theme by default. I actually discovered this, finding that they didn't work in Bootstrap Lite, which is the theme that Tim and I co-maintain. But then if we moved it into Core, we'd take it out of 7 so that we don't have 2 JavaScript scripts trying to do the same thing. So that would certainly keep 7 behaving. It would fix it in Basis. It would fix it in themes that haven't yet put in their own version of the JavaScript, like Bootstrap Lite. So the only thing I could think of that might be wrong is might be a problem is if someone has implemented their own JavaScript to set the widths of drop buttons in their sub theme or in a different contrib theme, that there now could be a conflict. So the thing I'm soliciting input on in that issue is if people think that's a problem or not. And if not, then I would go ahead and make that change in the submitted PR.
Remind me what the issue number was.
It's 6180.
60. So so this is fixed just with JavaScript.
Yeah, well, not all the problems are fixed with JavaScript. So if you compared the 2 things in 7, or what happens in Basis. In Basis, the width is wrong, and that's fixed in JavaScript. And the drop button extends outside of its column of the table, and that gets fixed in JavaScript. But the formatting also needs some touch up. One can see that in Basis, the labels come out right justified, and they should be left justified, and that's done with CSS.
Right.
And I would propose, since CSS is kind of the responsibility of the theme, I would propose to not try to do any CSS changes in core, leave that in basis, and then other themers can do their own CSS tweaking to fix the formatting and text justification. But the functionality depends of setting the width and the width of its parent, min width of its parent element. That's done in JavaScript, and that's the part that I'm proposing to put in the core.
Is there any part of the styling that you could say would make a sensible, any part of the CSS that would make a sensible default to have in core that then people could override if necessary, but the vast majority of drop buttons would actually want this regardless of theme, or is all of the style it is going to be down to the theme? There's no common elements. I'm just trying to explore whether some of it should go in, so if a theme hasn't done anything with it, then it will still look okay.
Yeah, so I would think that the text justification, whether you're in that left justifying if you're in a LTR language and right justifying if it's RTL, that's something that should probably be common to everything. But whether, for example, the links are transformed to all caps, which is the 7 behavior, or left untransformed, which is the basis behavior, that seems like it should be left to the theme to decide.
Yeah, but possibly the justification, it makes sense to possibly be in.
Well, so I haven't had a chance to process this specific issue. This seems to touch upon, although maybe it's not a problem, the bigger issue that we've struggled with for a long time, which is how to fix, and I think JavaScript bugs would run into the same problem as CSS bugs in Basis. I consider Basis to be kind of a broken theme in general, but we have not come up with a consensus on how to fix it in a backward compatible way in core. And maybe it's time we revisit that issue. Maybe some of us have changed our position on it, but we've had kind of a deadlock because we have proposals on how we could make CSS changes in core that are backward compatible, but we have opposition to those fixes because some people view them as being too adding complexity or confusion. I would have to go back and review what the different solutions are, and I don't know if we have a consensus on which of the solutions would be the best. But some of them have to do with things like putting once a year putting a new tag, a new class into Basis so that we can have changes that just affect sites that have the new class, things like that. I don't know if that would help with the JavaScript situation. Robert, so the idea, obviously, if this is just outright broken, the only real backward compatibility problem, which I think you've already identified, is if somebody already created their own fix, and then our fix somehow conflicts with that, and then or is that a risk?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and that's the sort of thing I'd like, I guess, input on from people who have more experience. Maybe some of the people who have created their own themes. Did you fix drop buttons, or if I think they're mostly only used in administrative places, in which case. People are probably using 7.
So, and we have a related sort of maybe an analogous issue that we talked about recently. I proposed looking at there's an issue to update to use views for the recent content block. that's provided by Core. I don't know if you were there for that discussion, Robert. It was fairly recent in the dev meeting. And it was largely me just looking for a kind of a low-hanging fruit project. It's like a very, very old issue. And there have been PRs to create a view that replaces the block, the recent content block. Now, the concern I had was, it seems like it would be an easy thing to fix. And in fact, there isn't a PR that does it already, but the PR that does it, in using views, it changes some of the classes. And so my first reaction was, is this even backward compatible? Is this even something we can do right now? And when we talked about it, Nate, and I'm tying this back to your issue. Nate pointed out that this block was set up with things like edit links in the table, the current table, which to him says, okay, this is primarily an administrative feature, not a front face. It's not a block that somebody would be showing users. If you showed this block to users that didn't have edit permission, they actually get like blank columns that look kind of weird, because that's where the edit button's supposed to be. It doesn't disregard the edit button, it just leaves sort of an awkward blankness. Anyway, so Nate suggested that maybe we could get the new view, maybe if we put a little extra work, we could get the new view to have the same markup or a similar enough markup that it looks similar, because right now if you switch from the default table to the new view, it looks visibly different. And so he suggested maybe I didn't make an effort to figure out, could we fix that problem? Could we make the new view look like the old thing? And then he added this other point, which is relevant to yours, which is, if this is primarily an administrative, it's not being seen by the public, that maybe we just don't worry so much if there are minor, we maybe the threshold for backward compatibility is less because it's administrative view. But if it's not perfect, it doesn't matter because it isn't a block being used by the public. And I think that's what you're arguing, is that these drop-down menus, even if they're used in basis, are still being primarily displayed to admins, not the public, probably, or.
Well, I think that's probably the case, just because no one has raised this issue before, because they haven't seen it in another theme. But the reason it came up for me was there's a place where I am showing users a table with drop button controls to decide whether you want to edit something or delete it or whatever. And and then I saw in Bootstrap Lite theme or a sub theme that things were looking bad, and traced it back and realized, it also looks bad in basis.
Okay. Well, I think this is appropriate for this group to talk about. However, I don't think we can make a decision, because this backward compatibility thing is a bigger issue. We should at least get some core committer input on it. What we could decide to do is to revisit this whole issue of making basis, of figuring out how to make improvements to basis. I have to say, it's kind of one of my big sort of pet peeves, is the fact that we're at a deadlock as a community in terms of improving fixing the theme fixes in core. Because I have suggested, we have these proposals that we can't get consensus around about making CSS changes that are backward compatible, and we can't get consensus on that. So as a workaround, I suggested, let's start working on a new theme and try to fix things in the new theme, and just leave basis as it is, have a new version of basis or something. But that also, there's no consensus around that. So I don't know, maybe this is an opportunity for us to revisit that and either decide that we're going to make fixes that might, break people's sites if they're sort of fringe enough, or we come up with the other solution. I would think that the solutions that it would apply to the CSS could also work for JavaScript, and that you could sort of use the same types of classes or whatever to tell, so that you could make the changes move it, to only affect future sites, but not to affect existing sites.
Okay, thank you. I have to run because I just heard the plumber doorbell.
Okay.
So thanks
Okay.
for that input, and I'll see you all later.
Well, we'll keep the discussion going. Goodbye, Robert. Does anybody else have thoughts on this whole backward compatibility issue, or how we should handle that, or if it's something worth worrying about?
I don't know enough about backward compatibility. I mean, I think
I'm sharing my screen. I'm going to just quickly look for some of the issues for if somebody wanted to go back and see, but go ahead. That's what I'm doing.
yeah. I think even if this is even if it's only used in the main on an administrative level, we still want to make a good impression on site builders who will see these, don't we?
Right. The argument against, so, there's an argument that if something just appears broken in Basis, that we should just fix it. And that even if that affects sites backwards, the idea being that, people have either created a sub-theme, and they've, which is going to get overridden anyways, so we're not going to hurt them. Or they're going to, just have to fix it. So, like basically what I'm saying is that if they've implemented their own fix and then we create a fix that conflicts with that, which breaks their fix, then some people have argued, well, those people should be equipped to be able to fix whatever problem we've introduced. I think some of us have just argued we don't ever want, the user experience to be broken by an upgrade, because we're afraid that site builders will quit upgrading if they're worried that things they have done, will get broken by a change, and very minor things can get broken in this way. And there are people in our community who say we shouldn't worry about that. That if these are fringe enough, and I think I don't know that we have any like a threshold for like how big of a problem it should be to determine if we do that. Anyways, so I mean that's why we have been reluctant to make these kinds of changes before, as the default position is we'd rather be that Basis just be broken than that we introduce fixes that might affect existing sites in a negative way. And I think, with the idea that people don't have to, if people don't like Basis, they could fix it. But I don't like this compromise. I don't like this status quo, and I'd love for us to figure out how to get around that. So if I want to just, okay, this should do it. So this meta issues with Basis, these are all like we should add this issue that Robert just raised. If it's not here, that should get added to this. But there we go. Here's the issue that we opened back in 2019, which is just to decide on the best way of making improvements to CSS for core. And we have a bunch of solutions. So one of the ideas was supplemental CSS selectors. One is adding a new theme. I don't know. I have to look closer. But things like there is an issue for the add supplemental CSS selectors. Jen put forward a whole proposal for that, but we got some feedback behind it, so, or some pushback on it. And we've never been able to. Either any of you guys have thoughts on this? I'll put this issue in. Well, I'm gonna put it in Zoom. Anybody have anything, or we can move on to another issue too?
Yeah, I don't see any problem with.
Let me look at. That's not it. Major side of the best way. Chen came up with more than one, I think, possible solutions over time. Okay, so one of the ideas was actually supplemental style sheets. So we would add, we would periodically add a new style sheet that that themers could either, that would be only used if on news sites. And then, but there were some people thought that would clutter up core and not be that useful. I think that's exaggerated because we'd only need to do that. Like, one of our ideas is if we did that, maybe we just do it once a year. So like the first release of each year is when we made these kinds of changes and we added a supplemental style sheet. And, within a few years, we'll be doing an upgrade. Counter to that idea was not adding supplemental style sheets, but just adding a supplemental kit class. Again, it doesn't have to be in every release, but it could be. I'm trying to look. I'm actually not seeing much opposition to this. So maybe there is, I'm open to any of these options. Maybe we could get consensus around the supplemental CSS selectors idea. I thought VW Panda had some objections to it, although he seems to be receptive in this discussion. I wasn't sure if there were one or two other. I'm not sure what Nate's opinion was on this. Maybe we should raise this issue again in the dev meeting. See what
I'm just thinking of alternative processes for someone creating their own theme. It could be encouraged of folks to not necessarily make a sub theme, but to copy the theme and just rename it. That way, you're not relying on a base theme that can change.
Sure, but anything, we could change the recommended practice moving forward, but that doesn't help us with the last 8 years of sites, right? Anybody that currently has either hacked bases or used it as a something would still be vulnerable to these kinds
And
of things.
the exit from that is probably creating a new theme with fixes. And then going forward, tell people not to sub-theme them.
Sure. So if we created a new theme, yes, I think that's a legitimate option. But there's a lot of pushback on that because some people think this is a simpler solution, which is just adding the supplemental CSS selectors that lets us insert. Basically, it would sort of give the site builder the opportunity to say, I don't want any new. I think maybe I didn't explain that fully, but I think part of this proposal was we add these supplemental CSS selectors, and then site builders would have a chance to like accept changes to their theme or not, and if they didn't, they just wouldn't get them, and then there would be no chance of us breaking their site. But if they did accept them, then they're accepting the fact that these changes could have some minor impacts. And then it's up to them to test and fix whatever changes. So, I mean, Justin, you say sort of the escape is a new theme. I agree, but the question is that the best escape? Is that the best path forward? And if so, we got to build consensus around it because, and to do the work. It's not a trivial. It's actually a pretty big task. Well, if there's no more thoughts on this, I'm inclined to raise this issue again in conjunction with Roberts and see if they're tied together or not. Maybe we can fix Roberts without having to deal with this. Otherwise, this might help us unblock Robert. I think there's a whole bunch of breaks and bases that we currently can't fix because of a lack of consensus on this. Anybody have any other design UX issues that they want to talk about? Okay. I don't either. I was thinking we might, if Robert were still here, talk about the backdropcms.org events issue. I don't think about adding a add to calendar feature, but I don't think we have the people here. We need to talk about that. So let's stop sharing, and I think we can just go ahead and end this meeting early. During the break, we could talk a little bit about the marketing meeting that's happening right now. For those who don't, maybe I'll just make an announcement on the recording. We're trying something today for the first time, which is sort of an asynchronous marketing meeting in Zulip, where we've opened up, we created an agenda and opened up topics for each agenda item. And we opened those last night. People have been chatting about them in the marketing stream in Zulip. If anybody wants to join us there, we will have the next marketing meeting in 2 weeks using the same format, assuming that people like or appreciate that opportunity. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. Okay, so